Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. Coming up, how Nepal is one of the most dangerous countries in the world for pregnant women, with medical care in some regions being at least a day's hike away. Also, the dire need for men to become allies in making the world a more equal place. I'll be talking shortly to Sophie Gallagher, the UK journalist and author of How Men Can Help. And an art display in Lagos, Nigeria, commemorates the still missing 108 Chibok schoolgirls who were kidnapped nearly 9 years ago by the Islamist group Boko Haram. But we begin in Nepal, which has one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the world. At least 3 mothers die per day while giving birth, with rural areas being even more dangerous for expectant mothers. Our team on the ground reports on how in some cases women need to walk for hours, if not days, in order to access proper medical care.
In the far west of Nepal, in this village, a neighborhood is preparing for a ceremony. According to Hindu rituals, this offering of food and milk is done on the 13th day after the passing away of a relative. 20-year-old Chitu died after giving birth to her first child. Leaving behind her 22-year-old husband and their baby girl. Ganesh and his sister believe lack of timely and adequate medical care led to her death. She died within hours after giving birth at a health center in a nearby village.
Less than 2 hours after giving birth, we were asked to go home, so we left. But soon we had to bring her back because she started bleeding. They were very careless. They should have kept her under observation for at least 24 hours. Then I'm sure she would have survived.
Unfortunately, it's not an isolated case. Every day, at least 3 mothers die in Nepal while giving birth. It's one of the highest maternal mortality rates outside sub-Saharan Africa. Almost 80% of Nepalis live in remote mountainous areas where the nearest hospital could be many hours or even days away. To bridge the gap, the government has opened hundreds of local health posts, like this one that started 4 years ago. They do, however, have their limitations. The ultrasound machine here doesn't always work. But the most crucial factor, doctors and nurses rarely visit. But for 7 months pregnant Sita, it's a relief to have this facility. It's her 3rd pregnancy, but her first under medical attention. 40% of pregnant women in Nepal do not receive any prenatal care.
You've lost weight. Eat properly or else you'll have problems during delivery. You'll lose a lot of blood and you're already anemic. They are not gaining weight during pregnancy due to the lack of food. It is the biggest challenge here. They are at a high risk of hemorrhaging.
Postpartum hemorrhage is the leading cause of maternal deaths in the country. It's often triggered by malnutrition and iron deficiency. In this district, 8 out of 10 women give birth unattended. The risk of women dying during pregnancy or childbirth is 40% higher than in France.
Now, self-described misogynist and contentious social media personality Andrew Tate is facing criminal charges in Romania. Tate has advocated male supremacy while celebrating violence against women on Twitter. But after an online exchange with climate activist Greta Thunberg went viral, the British-American reportedly drew attention to himself and his whereabouts. The 36-year-old former kickboxing champion is now in jail in Bucharest, facing charges of rape and human trafficking. Sophie Gallagher is a UK journalist and author of How Men Can Help, a book which succinctly spells out how men can be better allies in the campaign for equality. She joins me now from London. Sophie, thank you very much for your time. Andrew Tate is everything a man should not be. Why is it that men like him are still attracting millions of followers?
I think that what we really need to look at here is when young boys or young men feel disenfranchised, they feel like they don't have proper role models, they feel disempowered for whatever reason. Maybe that's economically, maybe that's socially. And I think they want something to blame. And women, as they long historically have been, continue to be a really convenient scapegoat for lots of men who feel sort of disempowered. And I think Andrew Tate gives them a sense of empowerment that they perhaps feel they're lacking. And he speaks to, I think, what a lot of young men, the way they want to feel like they're going to be successful or driven or whatever. And he tells them that by, employing this really sense of what we might describe as a toxic masculinity, that kind of makes them feel better about themselves. And I think that's a problem that we need to look at, how these young men are feeling so disillusioned. They're drawn to someone like Tate.
So what motivated you, Sophie, to write the book?
So in the UK in the last few years, we've had a few really horrifying examples of violence against women that I'm sure you'll be well aware of. For example, Sarah Everard was one that really gained a lot of attention, primarily because of the nature of the perpetrator being a police officer and the way in which she was harmed. So that was where the book came from, really, is sort of saying, hold on, we say we want to change this, but the same response happens every time. It's always women. Okay, well then women don't go out at night. Immediately we see it, the same scripts come out. So as soon as what happened to Sarah, immediately afterwards there were community groups handing out rape alarms, or the police saying, don't listen to music if you're out on your own. And it's all very well intentioned, but none of it actually asks the question, why do we allow this to keep happening, rather than just getting women to sort of mitigate the end result?
Your book effectively gives men a toolkit to become better allies. In brief, what do men actually need to do?
So I think the first thing would just be to accept that this is a really widespread problem, and it is a gendered problem. Yes, there is violence against men as well, but the majority of that is also perpetrated by men. This is a gendered problem. It's really widespread. Secondly, to look introspectively and to see how we can all contribute. All of us can contribute to women being treated as second-class citizens, or violence against women being normalised, the jokes we make, the media and the culture that we buy into. How are we helping to perpetrate that as well? And then thirdly, to call it out. This is really difficult. I understand it can be awkward, it can be difficult, but I think we need to reframe that calling out as something that is a quality of leaders, men who stand up. That's a really difficult thing to do. It's not a quality of losers or people who are making things awkward. It's a really admirable thing for men to be able to stand up among friends, among family, and say, you know what, you shouldn't have said that, or you know what, here's why what you've just said is incorrect. So 3 things: understand the scale of the problem, see that we might be part of it, and then start to try and do something about it by calling it out.
Sophie, we did see the social media hashtag #NotAllMen emerge post-Me Too. It does seem, however, many men are still reluctant to acknowledge that a woman's life is made up of navigating unsafe spaces and doing whatever one can to avoid or attract threatening behaviour. So do you think these days that men are more likely to engage with what you're saying?
I hope so. I hope they are. I do think increasingly, as we have more and more of these conversations, we have more and more of these high-profile examples, is really putting a spotlight on this and hopefully encouraging men and women in their own lives to speak to people close to them, friends and family, and share those really personal experiences. But it can be very uncomfortable for men to hear that the women that they care about, their lived experience has been very different to theirs. And I think that, that often it makes people feel uncomfortable and sometimes want to push back against that. But I would encourage men, if you want to actively be helpful in confronting this, to listen and to accept that just because you don't experience something, it doesn't mean that that's the way for the women around you.
Sophie Gallagher, it's been great speaking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And finally, an art exhibition with a difference in Lagos, Nigeria. The display of sculptures conceived by French artist Prune Nouri represents the still missing 108 Chibok girls who were kidnapped nearly 9 years ago by the Islamist Boko Haram group. The Chibok community continuing to suffer attacks from Boko Haram and its breakaway faction, which has pledged allegiance to the Islamic State group.
It is impossible for these women to contain their emotions in front of these sculptures. Their daughters are among the former Chibok schoolgirls still being held by Boko Haram. Despite 8 years of suffering, these mothers have agreed to have 108 faces of Chibok girls being sculpted for posterity. Prune Nouri is directing this performance. The visual artist is inspired by the Yoruba craftsmen of the 15th century. She shows the right gestures to these Nigerian students. The world-renowned sculptor, Prune has been working on this project for many years, before collaborating with the University of Ile-Ife and its Department of Fine Arts.
I wanted this project to happen in Ife, but I didn't know which artisans to work with. There are no craftsmen here anymore. But the university made sense. We fell in love with the art department professors who have an incredible philosophy.
These 108 heads of Chibok girls express a strong message against male domination. And this installation is essential according to this young woman. Amina Nkeki is the first former Chibok schoolgirl to have escaped from the Boko Haram den. She fears the indifference around the fate of the Chibok girls still held hostage.
I feel it to be helpful for them because when everybody in the world see these things, they'll still have, so people are still talking about these Chibok girls, even though that government has been quiet for now. It's not talking about our Chibok girls.
Prune Nouri wants to break that silence. These 108 clay heads will travel across Europe, America, and Africa so that the memory of the Chibok girls isn't lost to history.
And that's all for now. You can keep up with the 51% on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Plus, you can catch our previous programs on the France 24 website. So until our next show, bye for now.